And welcome to Season 2 of Talks of Outcasts, where we dive into the deep waters of the faith, the Bible, life as a Christian, and the journey of ministry. We are two preachers of the gospel. Miles is in the Midwest. I'm in the Deep South. And here we go. Today we have with us my good friend Lucas. Lucas, how are you, bud?
Better than I deserve, Chris. Better than I deserve.
Well, I got you there, man. I hear you. So Lucas is... tell you a little bit about Lucas. Lucas has a Bible degree from school just up the road from us here. He runs a nonprofit ministry, and that's doing, or at least runs a branch of a nonprofit ministry, and that's doing well and is growing and does a lot of good in our community with people that are struggling. And been married to his wife, and they have two amazing, precious, sweet little girls. And Lucas, it's good to have you with us.
Great to be here. I'm excited to. I know you, Chris. You know you're my pastor here in Texas,
Right.
But it's nice to get to have a conversation with the world-renowned college minister Miles Harris.
That is the truth. He's the true star.
He's even more,
everywhere he goes, he's the star.
That's right. He's even better in person than listening to him on a podcast.
Yes. Absolutely.
Debatable. That's definitely debatable.
Hey, I just got a text from one of our church members that says, "Go Cowboys."
How about him?
Yeah.
How
Must
about
be a Texas thing, right? Yeah.
Well, the Dallas Cowboys.
Hey,
I mean, they're
on
worldwide. That's America's team, bro. What?
Nah, not anymore. That died after Troy Aikman on them guys moved on.
I disagree.
No, it didn't.
Disagree.
America's team for life.
Yeah, okay. I thought that was the Chiefs, bruh, or something.
No
like
way.
No. Gross.
Listen, outside of the Midwest, nobody cares about the Chiefs.
Come on.
That's so not accurate. It's
Kansas and then Taylor
accurate.
Swift. Taylor Swift fans and Kansas people are the only people that care.
I hate to tell you, there's a lot of Swifties out there. And it's more than just
unfortunately.
So even if that's how Kansas City has their fan base, it's still pretty big. So,
well, I guess you showed us.
Speaking of the Chiefs, did they win? Did they pull it off, or did they lose?
Dude, I don't have any idea.
Well, you guys should know, right? This is playoff time.
Oh, this is great podcasting right here. Let me look up and see if the Chiefs won for Miles.
They were down by 3 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I just saw it passing. As we went to the big metropolis of Enid and had sushi with my wife and daughter.
We're not supposed to comment on where we are.
But if they haven't figured it out by all the memorabilia I'm wearing, the moments I mentioned, Alva, and then like recant my statement, like we edit that out.
The Chiefs won 23-20 in overtime.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. That makes them 6-5, boys. That means they're going to make the wild card, I bet you.
Yeah, just like those Athens Hornets that I covered now on the radio for playoffs.
There you go.
Nice.
Are they all out? All of our local teams are out, right? Or is that
see, I think Lindale got beat. Do you consider them local? They're part of our district.
No.
Kilgore's still in it. Westwood lost.
I know Frankston and
lost.
Westwood and Elkhart.
So,
yeah, whatever.
Miles, who's your favorite East Texas football team?
Yeah.
How do you feel about the Natchez? How do you feel about those Natchez Tigers?
Well, I'm over the Tiger thing. I'm not a big Tiger fan, so
you got the green.
I'm an Arkansas guy,
when you come here in January, you'll have some Natchez Tigers here for that big event. So you better be all about it then.
What random guy's going to show up talking about, I'm a fan of your high school basketball? No, that's weird. That's even weirder than we're thinking about. So we better move on before we digress. We've already digressed quite a bit.
Yeah.
You guys are talking about East Texas football now. So the journey we've taken.
There's nothing like Beast Texas football.
That's right. Well, Lucas, tell us about your nonprofit. Tell us what you do before we get into the question thing.
Sure. So I appreciate Chris reneging the statement. I'm not in charge necessarily. So I work at Hope Station, where we're talking about whatever. It's a local homeless transitional ministry that serves people that are either homeless or at risk of homelessness. We offer lots of different services. We're kind of the only ministry that does these kinds of things in the way that we do that in our whole county. So we get a lot of people coming in. Last year, I think they served over 700 specific individual clients with close to 8,000 different services. So we stay really busy. Gospel-centered ministry. Every person we help hears the gospel. It's not about stuff. It's about real life change. And the only way that happens is through a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so my part in that is I am in charge of their fundraising thrift store. I get to use my passion for like economics and business and budgeting and all that fun stuff to pursue something that I would consider a worthy cause in a ministry capacity. So for me, it's a great fit of getting to participate in this ministry, but also have a more the money guy, the businessy side of it that I get to do the things that I enjoy while doing something that's meaningful.
Yeah, that's
cool.
awesome. And they really do a lot of good work. And there's a lot of, in fact, we had some visitors in church today that were from I can't remember the name of that branch, Lucas, but it's so we've got like 5 or 6 pretty big prisons about 10 miles or so north of here. And so in Palestine, you also have a lot of nonprofits, or you have some nonprofits anyway, that help people transition back into civilian life after having served a prison sentence. And we had several of those from the women's side of it were in church today. So that was good.
Shout out to Rock Bottom Ranch, to those ladies. They're not related. They're not affiliated with our organization, but they're also in the area doing really good work. So shout out to those ladies, Rock Bottom Ranch. They do a lot of good stuff.
Yeah,
it's cool.
Amen.
It's really good.
Well, so Lucas, you had some questions you wanted to ask us.
Sure. So the first one is just an icebreaker kind of question to get the ball rolling, but it's in honor of Thanksgiving because we're recording this at the very beginning of Thanksgiving week. What are some of y'all's Thanksgiving meal hot takes in regards to some of the most popular dishes? Y'all got any Thanksgiving hot takes?
Yeah, cranberries are disgusting, bruh. Why do we keep eating them?
Wait,
man, I like cranberries.
The cranberries. Do you like both the canned and like the homemade, or is there one that you prefer?
If I had to choose, I'd probably go canned, because every time I've eaten homemade, it's like they're kind of still, I don't know, they still got the shell, I guess, of the cranberry. It's not quite broken down. I hadn't had time to marinate in the can for a long time. Yeah. So my mother-in-law, she hears this, is probably going to be very upset because she makes it homemade, and it's okay. But I'm just yeah.
So we had our Thanksgiving potluck today after church. Lucas, did you get some of that? It was like cranberries, but it was like in like a Jello salad.
I did not. I went for the canned cranberries.
Yeah,
that's right.
I've never had them like that, and they were amazing, and that was really good.
Yeah, I enjoy homemade. I prefer the canned. Like I want to see it plop out of a can with the ridges. Like that's right. To me, it's just Jello basically. But
you know why the ridges are there? They're to cut it. It's just to show you the exact slices that it needs to be.
I agree.
Well, so Lucas likes his cranberries all natural. So out of the can.
Yeah. What about you, Chris?
That's right.
Ocean's
I think turkey and dressing are very overrated.
Yeah.
I'm just not. I mean, I can do a whole Thanksgiving meal and not have turkey or dressing and be just fine.
That's fair.
I hate to say this, but that's almost everybody is that even a hot take anymore? Haven't we collectively agreed that turkey is overrated?
I don't know, because I hear people get all excited. Ooh, you going to have some turkey? Ooh, you can't wait to get some turkey. I'm like,
I don't know that I've heard that in a long time.
Really?
Man, I hear it. It seems like every year, like everybody's all crazy about turkey. But here's another one. The best Thanksgiving/Christmas dessert is pecan pie.
Yeah, it's mid.
Yeah,
no, it's not.
It's mid.
And I am now praying for your salvation.
Well, you should, but
because that's what we're going to be eating in heaven is pecan pie.
I think I'll tell the good Lord, I'll pass
Texas
on
barbecue.
I mean, the barbecue, okay, but the pecan pie isn't it? It's just,
What's your deal with pecan pie? It's amazing.
No, I'm not. I'm not about it. It's all right.
You ever had a chocolate pecan pie?
I've had it all kinds of ways, and it's still pecan pie. So, no.
All right, I'm not.
Have y'all had that? Speaking of pies, have y'all had that? The Taco Bell Baja Blast pie?
No, no.
I'm taking that to Thanksgiving this year. I'm doing it 100%.
You totally should.
That's crazy. That just sounds gross. Should. No, I'm just gonna throw that out there.
So,
it could be great.
Lucas,
it could be great.
So since you guys are, like your whole family's here on your side and on your wife's side, so how do y'all do Thanksgiving? Do you have 2 Thanksgiving meals, or do you kind of split it up? You do one Thanksgiving and one Christmas?
Yeah, so my wife and we thank God every day for the family that we have. It's almost entirely local. It's very united, very great relationships all around. And so the holidays are a great time of year for us. Unfortunately, that's just not the case for a lot of people with, divorce and things like that, and just just tough relationships. But I've got a very solidly Christian united family, and so we have a great time. Macy and I, with our 2 daughters, will the family coordinates the split up, and so it's not all on the same day. We'll like do one here, and then the
Oh,
weekend before or the weekend after, when people can kind of come in from out of town, we worked well together to make it happen where people can come in.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, you get 2 Thanksgivings.
we'll probably have 3,
Oh
Wow.
wow. Yeah.
because
Boy,
we'll
that's
do one
living
with
the dream, isn't it?
we'll do one with
Yeah.
my mom, with my wife's family side, and then we'll do one with my dad's side and my mom's side. So that'll
Gotcha.
probably end up being 3, which is a
Yeah.
huge
Nice.
blessing.
Yeah. That's a lot of turkey.
And it's a
Hopefully
lot
it's
of
a lot
pecan
of
pie.
Hopefully it's a lot of honeyed ham. That's my
Oh,
favorite.
there you go.
Get the
There you
turkey out of here. Get the ham in.
go.
Yeah, I'd much
Yeah.
rather do ham.
I'm all about like Mexican style Thanksgiving, like
Yeah,
enchiladas.
me too.
Sure.
I'd much rather have that kind of stuff. Of
We
course,
do
you guys are out there in the Cajun country, so I'd be okay with anything out
barely,
that way.
barely.
Well, Lucas, you're a lot closer than I am.
You know what? Actually, that brings me to another. I had a segue into our actual questions from the Thanksgiving thing, but I'm going to put a pin in it to address
Boy,
something.
Boy, look how smooth he is, Miles.
That's right.
Just it's
King
so
of
smooth with the
transitions.
transitions. Yeah.
That's right.
We're gonna come back to the smooth transition, but I'm gonna pivot real quick. Chris, I started listening to y'all's podcast when you came, because that's obviously when I became aware of it. And I really haven't listened to much of 1, but I've listened to all of season 2. And when you moved here, you started talking about how you now live in the Deep South, and y'all talk about something like that. This is not the Deep South, brother.
That's right, buddy.
No, I mean,
That's right.
technically you're right, but culturally it feels very much like the South to me.
Well, from my perspective, as somebody that has lived here, technically, yes, we are geographically about as far down south as you can go. But culturally, when you say Deep South, we here think Georgia, Alabama, South
That's
Carolina, cultural, like the Confederacy Deep South. That's kind of so when you say you live in the Deep South, I'm like, I mean, not really.
Okay, well, how would you describe it then?
It's the South. I
Okay.
just wouldn't call it the Deep South because I think that has a different connotation.
Well, so look, so this is something that I've thought for a long time, that East Texas has a lot more in common with Alabama and Mississippi culturally than it does with like West Texas or
Sure.
Panhandle Texas, or I know South Texas because I live down there.
Yeah.
And I certainly know it has more in common culturally with Mississippi and Alabama and so forth than say like Northwest Oklahoma.
For sure.
Which is not the South at all.
There's nothing there. I better be careful. Yeah, you.
I was about to say, actually, and I can say it. Is there a culture? Is there even a culture in that part of the world? I don't know.
There is.
Farming.
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of wheat farms, a lot of my son and I. So when we moved there from South Texas, which is very Latin flavored, when we moved there, we always would joke about the German Lutherans that made up that part of the world, and how they just weren't very open with their emotions, and everything is very much a don't come complaining to me about your problems because I got my own problems, and I figured it out. You should be able to figure it out. I mean, it's kind of a strange place from the standpoint that you have elements of what we think of as being more Western culture. And you've also got elements of what I think of as being more Midwestern culture. So like here, the Baptists are big, the Pentecostal churches are big. That's definitely more Southern. Whereas in that part of the world, you're talking about Lutherans and you're talking about Wesleyans, and so even like the denominations, I think have more of a Midwest flavor to them.
I think that's fair. It's a fair statement. But
Thank you, Miles.
the German thing, it's all the way back to World War II, right? Like they
Sure.
brought people out here to live in the internment camps. And even my wife's family is the Cooks, Koch, and then the Crouches. I mean, the Crouch just sounds German. So yeah, it's very much even the housing, like some of the houses look old German style. As you drive through Alva, it has very much of a German feel to it. So it's very interesting. It's interesting because Oklahoma is so it's vastly different. The north to the south, to the east and the west, it's all very different. Especially the I-35 corridor. That's a very true statement. what you cross over. Once you cross over going west, it's like a whole new world out this way. And so culturally, it's very interesting because you go from Native American to German, white. I mean, Anglo-Saxon. Maybe that's a better word. But it's very much different. And so when Chris says the Deep South, people from Alva are probably like, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds pretty close to right. But I could also when he says the Deep South for me, I'm also confused because I'm thinking Alabama.
Well, okay, but look,
Mississippi,
so like
Texas,
if you go to a gas station and this isn't like an unusual thing, but like you go to a gas station down here and you buy a Coke or you buy a taco for breakfast and they tell you have a blessed day. And that's just what everybody says. I
Sure.
mean, and that's to me, that's very Southern. That's a very Southern.
Hey, do they sell grits
kind of
in the to go in the morning?
Well, the only place I've really had breakfast are the Mexican food places because I love Mexican food breakfast. So I haven't experienced, but I think they serve grits. I think you can find grits around here if you really want to.
Well, I feel like if it's not like every place, it's not Southern bread because the Deep South, that's all you can get is grits everywhere. So I want to throw that out there, bro. That's right, Lucas. That's
I'll
chalk that up for
what
one.
I
Chalk
say.
that up for the young guys. So
I'll just say that I'm south of the Red River. Can we agree on that? Does that work for everybody?
That is correct.
South of the Red River.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So going back to I'm sorry for routing you up, Chris. I'm sorry. I apologize.
He's the worst sinner he knows.
I am the worst sinner I know, and it's okay, brother. I'm also a man of grace.
That's right.
I appreciate that. Going back to Thanksgiving, one of the luckily I've got a family more or less that's very traditionally Christian, several generations of Christians, and so the stereotype of everybody getting together over Thanksgiving and discussing politics and theology, and then like having food fights and just that kind of stereotype. I don't know if y'all have much experience with that, but and I know that both of you guys, after listening to y'all in a couple podcasts up to this point, have kind of said that y'all aren't very political from the pulpit. You understand that as from the pulpit, it's not my job to back parties and things like that. But this isn't the pulpit, so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's going on in the culture politically and in the conservative Christian camps, because I think there's been a lot of stuff happening. So I have a few questions written down that it's one bigger conversation, but there's kind of individual questions within it. So the questions should kind of flow. I think I've structured it okay. So I'm going to read the question because I want to make sure I read it like I wanted to, and then we can talk about it. Is that all right?
Yeah, it works.
Okay. So the first one I have is, with the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk, which was not that long ago, there seems to be a large push online saying that Christians ought to become more radical or radicalized, or just conservatives in general ought to become more radical in confronting what we would consider unrighteousness and pushing our agendas on the culture back, because we feel like they've been pushed onto us. And so there's this big push for conservatives and Christians to become more radical and being vocal. Have you seen that in your areas? Have you heard that? Am I the only one feeling that? And how has that shaped your ministries? And are maybe you finding yourself in the midst of this climate becoming more radical one way or the other?
Yeah, the place I really saw it was, right after Charlie Kirk was shot. There were a lot of people that were calling for pastors to talk about that the next Sunday. And, I didn't. I think, Miles, you said that you mentioned it, kind of in passing. It wasn't like a big point in your sermon the next Sunday, but that you did mention it. I think there is a push. I think one of the problems that you have with both parties is that they start kind of eating themselves, right? They start, well, you're not liberal enough, or, well, you're not conservative enough. And so the middle ends up shrinking as more and more people run to the extremes. And I'm not so sure that's really healthy. In fact, I'm pretty confident that's not healthy, for our country. And I think, traditionally Baptists have been really big on the separation of church and state. I mean, so big on it that, for a long time, Baptists wouldn't even vote. That's how seriously they took it. that the city of man, to use Augustine's term, and the city of God were two completely, distinctly different things. And so I know traditionally as Baptists, we didn't really participate in the political arena at all. That's obviously not the case today. I remember in this, and it's gotten a lot worse now. But I mean, I can remember in 2016 when Trump and Hillary ran. I had people in my church that accused me of being a progressive because I wasn't completely on board with Trump. Because I felt like that there were some legitimate issues. And so when you raise those issues, for so long, Republicans were the party of family values, right? That was a big thing for that side. And then here they are, they're all in on Trump, who, this is not a comment about whether or not he's a good president or whether or not he's a bad president, but I don't know that anybody, well, I can't say that. I think we can safely assume that a man who says he's never repented because he's never had anything he needed to repent for, I think we can safely assume that biblically, we're not talking about someone who's been redeemed. Now, that might have changed. I don't know. He's not really asked those kinds of questions anymore. But it blew my mind that we were all, and by all I mean like, conservative Christians, that we were all kind of jumping on that bandwagon. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, I don't like that side and I'm not really all that crazy about him, but I think this side is closer to where I want to be. I mean, that's one thing. But, when you're seeing like people make statements about, this guy is, the Messiah. I mean, this guy actually said that he would, that he was going to be the greatest thing to ever happen to evangelicals. I mean, he said that. I'm like, no, you don't get to say that because that's Jesus. That's not you. So I don't know. I mean, and I get it, and I really get it from both sides because I do have people in my life that are, that are much more sensitive to these things. We had a gentleman pray for Christians who were being martyred, and I know for a fact there was somebody in the church that day that was deeply offended by that because we don't spend the same amount of time praying for other children that are martyred. Not martyred wouldn't be the wrong case there, but like, Christians are not the only people in the world that suffer. And we ought to be just as concerned with Muslims who suffer as we are with Christians who suffer. And that was their argument. And so their issue with me was, hey, look, you're the pastor. And so, you need to be attacking these things. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to let the right dictate to me what I'm going to say. And I'm not going to let the left dictate to me what I say. I mean, I'm here to preach Christ and him crucified. And so I think as we get older, we tend to become more conservative. I think that's just generally the path that we take because it's safe and it's familiar and it's comfortable. But I'm trying really hard not to become radicalized. I am. Miles, what do you think about all this?
I mean, I think that to use your terms, radicalized, I think that's very true. See a lot of young people, 20s, probably early 20s, maybe even 18 to 25, 18 to 30 maybe, that are radicalizing how they view politics in the Christian sphere. And the danger for me is that we're putting a person higher than what he is. And by that I'm saying is, let's just, I mean, if the voice or martyrs are true, every 7 minutes, I think a Christian dies. Let's just say, I don't know if that's exactly right. I haven't read the statistic in a long time. But if that's true, and they're dying for being confronted with Christ, not just debating conservative issues at a mic with college kids, which I'm not saying isn't beneficial. I'm not even getting into the free speech stuff. I'm just simply going to the Christian, how a Christian should look at life and everything together. Is why do those people not get the same time as he did? Now, I grant it, those guys overseas probably aren't looking for the clickbait on YouTube and to get views, because either way you look at it, everybody's funded by something. And so you have to kind of play the narrative. Now, when I hear things that Charlie said, like in his videos, he clearly articulated the gospel. Like, you can't deny the guy that he was doing those things. He's clearly articulating what it means to be lost, how to get saved, and those things. The danger I see is if we're not careful, we're going to become Republicans that are Christian instead of Christians that are Republican. Does that make sense? Like, we are switching, we're switching the idea that the two are interchangeable when the reality is, no, we're Christian first, far, far between. I don't care what party you belong to, or even if you're in the middle, that we're Christian first. And so the Christianity, Christ, the Spirit should be driving us in how we view our faith. If I was to say we need to be more radical in anything, it's to go back to what David Platt and Francis Chan talked about as being radical in our faith, and the idea that we're willing to share the gospel no matter what the circumstance is. And the other side is you got to be careful, because you just don't want to do social gospel, where I just save kids that are Muslim, I just save people, or even like the humanitarian, what you do. It's got to be about the gospel, because Jesus is the only thing that's ever going to change anybody. We can give them food, we can give them shelter, we can give them all these things. And I come from a drug addict ridden family. I come from poor people and all those things. And I've seen humanitarian aid, but it cannot change the heart and soul. And so if I was to say we are to be radical about anything, it's just pushing, not even pushing, just going out and evangelizing people. Taking the gospels to the street like it used to be done. Like if I'm in, because I'm in the college area. I'm in the quad. Let's pretend like we have a huge quad here. I mean, I'm sure at Texas A&M and all these other places, the quad looks significantly different than where I'm at. But my conversations should be about Christ. We can talk about all these things. We can even talk about social politics and all these things and how they affect us and all these things. But let me tell you something about what affects me more than any of those things. We can talk about abortion, but here's why I stand on where I stand with abortion. Here's why I stand on where I stand with looking at poor people and how we deal with them and how we do all these things, is because the Bible says this. The Christ says this. Christ showed us this. The Bible shows us these things. And so if we're radical about our faith, then it will dictate some of these things. I mean, I'm going to be the person to tell you there should be Christian politicians, there should be Christian doctors, Christian lawyers. But again, the key word in that sentence is Christian first. And so the huge danger I see is that we are turning into Republican Christians, or we're arming that either way. I think some people are arming it the other side. And those type of things when we're missing the point, because I think if we're truly living our Christian, if we're truly living our life out in the Spirit, he fleshes these political things out and points us in a direction we should go. Whether that be, well, we can argue about what that direction should look like and be like. I mean, because it's going to lean, whether you like it or not, it's going to lean one way more than the other. It has to. And that's how you read Scripture. You can't take Scripture out of it, and because if you start taking Scripture out of it, then what are we doing as believers? So that's what I say. And I will say it's a very dangerous thing, because I've talked to students that can quote me more Charlie Kirk things and his statistics than they can Scripture. And and I have a good student, a past student of mine, who is very much about it, and And we have lots of conversations back and forth, and he accuses me of being liberal. He accuses me of all kinds of things. And I said, no, I want you to see that the gospel is the priority. That if we go to the gospel, guess what we're going to want? A family. We're going to want those values that the Scripture teaches. We're going to want to be a husband. We're going to want children. We're going to want one wife. We're going to want to love her like Christ loved the church. And we're going to want to love others, because that's what Scripture tells us, not what Charlie Kirk was selling me. And for that fact, not even what Albert Mohler is selling me. He is on this other side of everybody gets all worked up. Yes, and what he's telling me is very true. Yes, we need families. The birth rate is on the decline and all these other things. But the only way they can get fixed is what you said in the beginning, is through God and through Christ. And so that's where, man, if I was to be radical, that's where I'd say we need to be radical. I know that took me a long time to answer that, but
those are good thoughts. I agree wholeheartedly. You calling it Republicans who are also Christians I have used the term, and this isn't my thing, I don't know where I heard it, but Christless conservatism
Mm.
is just
Mm.
as problematic as
Yeah.
liberalism is, right?
No,
It's
100%.
just conservatism for conservative sake. Like
Yeah.
that's not good either. That's not going to change anybody. That's not going to change any hearts. You need Christ at the center of your political views or things like that. I guess for me, when I think about this conversation, is I'm of that demographic. I'm 27 that you just mentioned. I really believe that young men shape the culture of the next generation. Like if the agenda can be pushed upon the young men of a society, it will win the next generation, right? Because that's what the young men are going to grow up and then lead believing. And so that's why I'm seeing this a lot, just targeting me as a young
Mm.
man. There's a lot of voices telling me that I should become radicalized about this or that. And some of it I agree with, right? And the
Sure.
idea of bringing the gospel into conflict with the world. Why have we not been more outspoken
Mm.
and radical about bringing the gospel into conflict with how it affects legislation or how the gospel should affect the way just those kinds of things. And maybe for me, what I want to clarify going forward is I think all three of us and any Christian, when you really ask them, would agree when you're talking with an unbeliever, it's the gospel first, right? And that's,
Mm.
you're not going to argue anybody into heaven because you know more statistics than them. It's
Right.
the gospel, right? And so none of us
Right.
would disagree with that, I would think. But my questions that I kind of have geared up are, let's just assume we're just talking Christian strategy. Like within the brother and sisters of Christ, how can we strategize together and what ought we be doing within the congregation, right? So yes, I mean, I think when we're talking about winning the lost and
Mm.
changing people's hearts, it's the gospel. But then within the church,
Sure.
within the brotherhood, the brethren, how can we come together in unity about what should our strategy be, or what maybe the temptations are within the church to then get out into the world? Because we're called to have the same mind as Christ. Well, my question, I guess, is, and what I'm about to ask is another little question, is if we're called to have the same mind as Christ and have that unity, well, then how would Christ approach the
Mm.
world of the political climate that we're in? How ought he expect us as Christians? How would you as a minister or a pastor admonish your congregation to, okay, you're a Christian, that you have been redeemed, you're regenerated. Now here's how you ought to engage this world around you. So, in that conversation we've been having, one of the words that's getting thrown around a lot is Christian nationalism. Am I y'all hearing that too?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
And I feel like the definition for that is all over the place, right? Some people are using it to mean one thing, some people are using it to mean another, and some people are using it as an insult. You're just a Christian nationalist. Some people are using it as, I am definitely a Christian nationalist, but they're not meaning it in the same way that they're meaning it, and it's this whole thing. And to me, I do think we as Christians should be bringing the gospel forward in how we run the country. Like I don't know of the correct terminology to use if you want to label that, but yeah, we should be promoting our Christian values if we really believe that God's law is perfect and he has perfect morality, and the law is just legislated morality, right? That's all that the law is legislated morality, right? We should do everything that we can do to promote a Christian country. And if you want to call that Christian nationalism, I don't know. So I want to talk with y'all and get your perspectives on what is Christian nationalism? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And how would you, again, we're assuming we're talking to Christians, right? So it's not a question of how do you save souls? It's what should the strategy be for the brethren to go out and engage the society around us with the gospel in a productive way?
I'm gonna let you go first, Chris.
No, I was going to let you go first.
That's okay. I'm doing
I
some.
think some of it is that we have to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of our definitions, because Christian nationalism, like a lot of other things, it kind of becomes a keyword or a byword that people just throw around, and you ask this person what it means, and well, it means this. And we kind of had the same thing going on with the gospel probably about 10 years ago when everybody was doing the gospel thing. And then pretty soon, you had these national figures that are getting up and, whatever their agenda is, and they would just tag, hey, this is the gospel. Well, no, it's not. And so I think that's the first thing that we have to do, is make sure that we're all kind of working from the same definition. I think as Christians, our responsibility to the world and our responsibility, let's say just to our nation, is to work for its flourishing. And the reason that you want people to, not the reason, but one reason that you want people to acknowledge, sort of a biblical view of morality, is because that it's better for the flourishing of the country. It's better for the flourishing of the country when people get married and have children. And it's better for the flourishing of the country when, you know, we're not oppressing the poor, or, when we're not so tied into big business that, we're just going to sign off on whatever big business thinks. And, who cares about the shrinking middle class, right? That's not working for the flourishing of everybody, not just our camp. But I think we have an obligation to work for the flourishing, for everyone. There's a place in the Old Testament after the Israelites were exiled, and I know that's Old Covenant and so forth, but where they're told, plant your gardens. And now this can be a little bit of Chris Revised version, but they're told, plant your gardens, work your job, love your neighbor, like work for the good of the city. And I don't know that has really changed under the new covenant, under Christ. I think that's still what we ought to be working for. And I think one of the well, not one of the problems, but I think one of the challenges that we have is that, of course, we want people to come under the submission of Christ. Of course, we want people to submit to God's law. But if you're going to live in a country that is free, then where's that boundary, right? Because we know from church history that imposing our ideals on lost people doesn't work. When the church tries to be when the church tries to be the government, historically that's a disaster. And when the government tries to be the church, historically that's a disaster. And so God instituted both the government and the church. And I don't know, Lucas, it may seem like I'm kind of talking around your question. I don't mean to. But where do we draw these lines? Are you just going to go back and I know you're not saying this, I'm making a little bit of a straw man, but are you just going to go back and just say, okay, well, if you're a homosexual, we're going to take you out and stone you, right? Because that's Old Testament law. Now, like I said, I know that's not what you're saying, and I know, I don't know anybody that advocates for that kind of thing. But I make that statement just to say, where do we draw these lines? And that to me is a big part of the question. Where are the lines drawn? Are we going to mandate church attendance? Are we now? And again, I'm making extreme arguments to make my point. But I think where you raise a valid point is that for a Christian, you don't shut off Christianity when you go to your workplace. You are called, as Miles said, if you're a politician, well, you're not a politician, Monday through Saturday and then a Christian on Sunday. No, you're a Christian the whole time, and your Christianity ought to bear weight on the decisions that you make as a politician. Same thing if you're a doctor or you're a teacher, or you haul trash for the city. Whatever it is that you do, you can't just shut off your Christianity, and you can't just shut off the gospel. You've got to figure out, okay, what does it mean to be a Christian who's involved in this kind of work? So I just think they're really difficult questions. Once you start kind of getting beyond sort of the big picture platitude kind of things, and you start thinking in terms of, okay, what does this look like? Where do we draw the lines? These become very complicated questions. Your basic point, I think, is valid, that that God created humanity, and so he's the one who knows how it is that life is supposed to work. He's the one who knows how it goes best. And so it is a good thing to bring people, or for people to come under submission to that. It's in the details that I think we have the real, sort of some of those sticky things that we have to deal, or that we would have to deal with. So, Miles, what do you think?
I mean, I would agree with what you're saying. The part where I struggle with all this is like, I know men that would give their life for the country. My brother was a serviceman. And I have lots of family my grandpa served in World War II, and those types of things. And so they went to war because my little brother was in Bagram when it was the most hostile place when it was declared, as a neutral zone, and all those other things. I mean, he was there right as the ballistic missile. He just took off before the ballistic missile hit Iraq. So, um, I know my family, and I know people other than my family, good friends that have went and served in the military because they believed in the nation of the United States of America. They believed in what it held for, the freedoms that it does, and all those things. So I really struggle with this idea. Is it nationalism versus I just had it pulled up, patriotism, where maybe I kind of try to distinguish the two, because for patriotism, I want my country to succeed. I want the values in which we held to in the beginning to succeed, because we wouldn't be where we're at without all of those things. Um, the nationalism part where I struggle with that is because it does start to segregate. It has to. Nationalism in and of itself is saying that one system is better than the other system. And because of that, you are now in the sphere. And so Christian nationalism, whether really people maybe mean it to do that, maybe it just depends on the person, because sin, our heart is deceitfully wicked. As the scripture tells us. So there has to be malicious things inside of Christian nationalism. But then there's that mid ground that I don't think they mean it to be segregated, but they believe that Christian moral principle and value is better than what we're seeing, better than what's being given to us or propagated to us throughout the United States. I mean, you can look at New York. They just elected a Democratic socialist, an open socialist, democratic socialist, who is going to attack the very thing that we stand for as America, and all those different things. So
don't forget Muslim.
Yes, and Muslim as well. And so, and that's the part that I struggle with in the Christian nationalism. This country, while we can debate that it was founded with Christian principles, it also allowed for freedom of religion. So constitutionally,
and there's the problem.
And constitutionally, we have to. This is where Christians, I feel like we get the rub. We love the Constitution as long as it plays for our strengths. We don't love the Constitution when it goes against what we feel is wrong. And in Rome, guess what they were doing? They were worshiping pagan gods outside of Christianity. That's what they were doing. India, right now, mostly Buddhists and Islam, Muslim, they're worshiping there, and there's Christians thriving in those places. Communist China, known to be the biggest and fastest growing church in the world, is thriving under communist rule. And so I don't think we as Christians can just say that we won't thrive because we're being attacked because we're Christian. I don't know. I won't go that far, but I do understand why they would want this side of it. But I think I'd be careful to be the nationalist. I'd more rather be identified as someone who is patriotic in this idea that this is what America stands for. And this is the things that people have died for and fought for. We didn't go to war in Iraq to go back to Jim Crow laws. You know what I'm saying? We have come to be better people socially than we used to be. We understand that when it was written that we all are inalienable people, that all of us are individuals, black, white, all these different colors make up the image of God, the image bearer of God. And so, while we have Christian foundations and fundamentals, I think that's what I'm looking for. That is very true. But we also can't forget that we're dealing with lost people. And so it's a lost system. Thomas Paine, Thomas Jefferson, major people in our beginning were not Christian. Now they think that being a Christian, like that ideal, right? The ideology is good for the economy. It's good for people because they just love each other. They're going to be better people. They're going to be people who love their neighbor and all these types of things. Well, yes. I mean, I understand those things, but at the end of the day, sin is sin, and sin is going to come in and smash those things together. So I don't know if I answered your question. I mean, I'm not trying to dodge it. I just think that when we think of nationalism, you can start to see separation. We start to see lines drawn, like, I mean, I don't even know if I should be careful anymore, but let's just talk about let's just talk about the border crisis and what's going on. I have good friends who were born in Mexico and their parents chose to bring them over here. Now, we can argue that when it moves from their parents' decision to their decision to do the right things. But do I think that there's this idea that they need to be stopped on I-40, kicked around and put in handcuffs and shipped in crates back to wherever they're going, or what is the Alcatraz in Florida? Those types of things. I'm not saying that we don't have a problem. I know we obviously have a problem, but I don't know that we're handling it in the right way. Because if we were handling it in the right way, do you think the Southern Baptist Convention would send out people to make meals on the border for those that are being detained? Like there's things that we as Christians are doing and meeting the needs that you're right, Christ would love them and teach them the gospel and all those things. And that's I mean, I don't know, it's a sticky thing. It's a sticky thing.
But he also said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's.
Right, but that's the law, right?
And give to God. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I mean, like these people who just assume, well, if Jesus was here, he'd just go down there and just, throw down fire bolts at ice. And I mean, I just don't know that that's true.
Yeah.
You said something that that I think really illustrates the point that I'm making as far as the lines that have to be drawn somewhere. Like when you mentioned, in New York, they just elected this guy. And then you made the comment about, freedom of religion. Well, see, that's the rub. That's the problem. Most of the men that I know who voluntarily went into the military at some level went because they wanted to go to defend freedom. Well, if freedom is going to be a bedrock of this culture and of this society and of this nation, then everybody's got to be free. It can't be, hey, we're the free ones, but y'all over there, y'all aren't free. I mean,
right.
freedom has to be the same for everybody.
But when you say the argument, though, and this is where the nationalism rub comes in, is that the other side of that coin is that people only gripe about Christianity being pushed down their throats. Now, Christians will gripe about these other things, Islamic views and all these things being pushed down their throat. But the vast majority, more people get upset about Christianity being pushed than anything else. Because Sharia law, because of all the things, and this is just me being very generous, they're against everything that Christianity is against, but they're even on the extreme. Like, I mean, you go to their countries, and and this is what I mean by that. I think this is where Christian nationalism gets this huge rub when in some way I can see their argument, because if I have to sit here and be pushed down about these views to me, and I've got to start indoctrinating my kids and the public school system and all these different things, they're being pushed and pushed and pushed. But the moment we talk about putting scripture in, I mean, in the phrase of terms, literally all hell breaks loose over these things. And so my struggle is, Chris, and I'm not arguing with you, my struggle, and I think the nationalist question struggle is, how do we approach this? Because if it is freedom of religion, and if it is all these things, then everybody has to play by the rules.
Agreed. I do agree with that. And so I think for Christians, I think it's it's important and it's great for Christians to be involved in the political process. And so if you're in a place where you don't like what your school district is doing,
Sure.
there are ways to make those changes. There
Sure.
are, and working within that system. I mean, you can run, you can be more active. You can go to school board meetings. Most school board meetings are public.
Sure.
And so there are avenues. You can homeschool your kids if you want to. You can, if you've got the ability. Now, this is part of the problem too, isn't it? Not everybody's got this ability, but there are school districts in this country that aren't pushing this nonsense.
Sure.
And so you can take advantage of those.
Sure.
And so
But
go ahead.
sure. Well, I was going to say, but do you think if I'm in Sacramento and I'm a Christian that I'm ever going to be able to change the political system?
No, but
And
you
so,
do, but you do have the ability to move out of there. Sacramento, by the way,
sure.
is fairly conservative. It's Southern
Okay. Well,
California that's
I'm
wrong.
just saying,
I know what you're saying.
fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
Los Angeles, if that's better
Yeah.
for you. My point being is
It
this is the
is.
fear. This is the point, is even the fear is that once it infiltrates the coast, it works its way into the Midwest, which we know is to be true. So if the coasts are already moving to a democratic socialist point of view, now we can blame what we just saw get elected in, but they've already been there. Like, they're already there, they're already pushing those things. And so to be a Christian, and if the answer is to move to the Midwest, what does that do other than divide the country down the middle? And we're worse off than where we were. And the question, that's why this Christian nationalism is such a hard thing, because if I want New York to change and I'm a believer, then I've got to sit and I got to put down roots and do the hard fighting. I've got to do the hard plowing. I've got to sit there and I've got to preach the gospel on the corner. And I'm not saying there's not, I know there are men doing it. And I know there are families that are suffering and doing it for the sake of Christ. And they need our prayer and those types of things. But that's where the nationalism thing gets tricky, because I can understand how they feel. I live in an all red state. There is no blue in the state of Oklahoma. Now, I know that's swapped because it used to be the other way. Like, I know that. And so this is, it's hard. It's easy for me to say in my red state, but even in my state, there's still issues on being Christian and being in the political sphere. In fact, you can just look up history of who our reps are. In some ways, he's had to cave. In some ways, they have had to cave into some of the things that needed to happen because they needed it to pass. And that's going against some of the Christian things. And so it's such a tough thing to talk about and to really nail it down, because, should we be patriotists? Should be a patriotism? Are we patriots? I would argue and say, I hope, because our country is, even in all of its faults, is far better than some countries, most we'd say. And on the other side of that, the nationalists are just like, man, what they're telling me should be working is not working, and it needs a change. And so that's the struggle. I mean, I think that we would agree on the struggle between the two. And I don't know where you draw the lines. You're absolutely right. I don't know, because if you're not careful, you go right back to where we came from. Segregations, and you'll start talking about, if you don't read the Bible, we're going to throw you in jail. I mean, you can go back to the Crusades type of thing. And then, of course, I know those are extremities. But we also saw this happen in Oklahoma, where he instituted that the Bible be taught in the school system, and the state freaked out, an all red state, mind you.
Yeah,
Now,
in fact, I had
Sorry,
let me just interject this real quick. I had the superintendent come to see me, and I told him, I said, I don't want any. I frankly don't want the school district deciding who should teach the Bible.
100%.
I mean,
I agree with you.
I don't trust the school district. I mean, I would rather they not be taught the Bible than to be taught the Bible incorrectly, or certainly be taught the Bible heretically.
Sure. I would agree with that.
See, that's what I'm saying, though, is that I don't want the government anywhere near it. I'd leave it alone.
Sure.
Teaching the Bible is the responsibility of the church. It's not the responsibility of the federal government or the state government, for that matter, or the local school system, for that matter.
Sure. I think
so. We should get rid of the government. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Real quick to interject, Miles, you had some really good stuff to say there, and I'm right there with you for a lot of it. You mentioned you know, the whole if I'm in California, what can I do to change things? So should I leave? Should I plant roots? You know, you mentioned the church thriving in like Southeast
Sure.
Asia, where they're literally in communist
Sure.
dictatorship countries. They've got no hope of openly professing their faith,
Sure.
proselytizing, but the church is still thriving. But let's just say, like you were saying, in those countries, if given the chance, the church would 100% push to make their country more Christian, right? I know that
Sure.
they do not have that opportunity, and if they were to try, they would just be martyred.
Sure.
But realistically, if they were given the opportunity, if they had the chance, they would 100% seek to do those things, which is America. We're just further along on that journey than they are. And so we're kind of having to decide, are we still committed to Christianizing our country, or are we going to start backing off of that?
But see, but that's the problem. You know, are we committed to Christianizing our country? How does that even work?
Well,
I
you're
mean,
you're
to me,
asking.
to me, it goes back to what you were saying much earlier in the podcast, and that is, you know, that we preach the gospel, and
Sure.
you know, because everything. Look, I mean, everything else is just facade. Everything else is just veneer. Is just surface. And the only way you're really going to change the country is if God sends His Spirit, and you know, people start coming to know Christ.
Sure. But isn't that mm, is that not? But see, I think so. For example, Japan, when it was the gospel was brought there, it took off like a wildfire. So much so in the beginning, I will pull up my history. I've done this
No,
research. Let
that
me
is
finish.
okay.
Let me finish. And then when it combated the traditional views and they were starting to lose their heritage, it then was
Okay, yeah, yeah.
oppressed and then driven underground to where it was huge 200 years later after it's been oppressed. I'm not going to disagree with you that if they had the opportunity for to live out in the open and be free, of course they would be more of a Christian nation, but that's because the gospel changed their heart radically. It has nothing to do with their nation thriving and the idea of, well, if we're going to be Christian, that's going to make us thrive. And I think that's where Christian nationalists maybe get this rub. It's because of us knowing Jesus and the gospel changing us is that we see the evidence of our fruit, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, selflessness, all those fruits that are listed in Galatians 5, all those things come out. And because we have the Spirit and those fruits evident, it has to dictate change in our world. And so that's of course they're going to have the opportunity to do those things. And so even if we just want to take one of the hottest, stickiest topic even today in our time, abortion, it's going to be looked differently because they see that the sanctity of life begins at conception. That's the scriptures. And so because of that, they'll want to legislate those types of things. I don't know that that's Christian nationalism as much as it is believe in the Bible and we're trying to save lives. I mean, but it's been thrown into the camp of Christian nationalism, and I think a lot of these things, of course, Christians don't want to see poor people starving and suffering. If we did, we wouldn't have the ministries that even you're involved with. We wouldn't have disaster relief. We wouldn't have missions. We wouldn't have humanitarian aid. We wouldn't have sin relief. We wouldn't have Operation Christmas Child. We wouldn't have any of those things if we wanted to see people suffer. And so what we have to be careful of is that it's not social. It has to do everything with the heart. And we have to, like Chris is saying, and I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. This is why people get mad at me, because I don't preach politics. And I really just want to say, hey, I have my political views, but at first, let's work through the gospel. Let's work through why that affects the way I believe in what I believe. This is a hot take. On Sanctity of Life Sunday, I'm going to preach sanctity of life because it's an important thing that is still prevalent in our culture. It is still something that people that are in the church. I know people in my last church that had literally paid for abortions so that their families wouldn't have to deal with the burden of a child. Not because of anything bad, not because of anything like that. And I didn't do it. I don't preach on sanctity of life to rub it in their face. I do it because we need to know how important it is that God created us and we are in his image. and how much the gospel radically changes us. And even if I'm a part of someone committing an abortion, God still loves me enough to forgive me. And I can move forward, and I can see God's radical change in my heart. And all those things sometimes need to be said from the pulpit. It's not political, it's biblical. And those biblical teachings lead to outward change and outward expression. And that's the part where I would say we need to approach it. And there are going to be people that don't like it on both sides. I mean, I have Republicans that don't like preaching on sanctity of life. Democrats don't like it. And people in the middle, maybe we should avoid that topic from the pulpit. Well, somebody has to talk about it because the world's talking about it to death. We're still debating. It was Roe v. Wade was overturned, and now we're still debating on whether we should still do it, or all these other things. Should I be able to pick gender, color, athletic prowess in all these different things? We need to have some chats about how the scriptures talk about life and those things. And so, yeah,
actually,
Lucas got me all worked up.
That reminds me, I forgot to add my pronouns into my little name card here at the bottom of the screen. So I'm just going to put those in there real quick in case y'all cared. I, real quick. Sorry. Whatever. I don't think if someone is in the Christian nationalist, again, the definitions, define that how you will, but I personally don't think that pushing Christianizing our country is going to save souls. But I do think, kind of like Chris, I think you said this earlier, if we really believe God created this world to function in a certain way, and we have a statistically majority Christian nation, why are we not pushing to run the country in a way that God has said is the best way to order things, right? If we have the ability to, with enough voices, affect change, why would we not pursue to rightly order our nation as we believe God would have us do in the scripture? Which there's a lot of debatable things in that, but there's also a lot of clearly right and wrong things that we could definitely take ground on if we just would unite over saying, we want our country to be an honoring country to the Lord.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that at all.
I don't think you do, but you said that earlier.
I'm in agreement.
Which is kind of where I think it's important. Like, I guess if I'm going to take a stance, I 100% wish that, we would as Christians unite over like, look, we're going to get involved, and this is kind of my last question. I know y'all try to wrap up at around this kind of time mark. I'm not sure where y'all are at, but this is kind of
Miles.
the last. Oh yeah. We're going to have a 6-part, 2-hour long each.
Hey, we did a 2-hour one in the first season that we had to split up into 2. That was real fun, wasn't it, Miles?
Not for Miles.
It was when the wives joined us. Yeah.
Yes.
I got you. Oh yeah. I listened to part of that one. Hey, so my thought was, I guess, is okay. So maybe practically, how ought you, as ministers, you're interim pastor, full-time pastor, senior pastor at our church, what would you encourage your congregation? So I know that the definitions are debatable. Some of the minute nuanced details are debatable. No one's going to argue about that. But just practically, what ought we as Christians be doing to see a positive change? Obviously, preaching the gospel, changing hearts, yes, obviously. But just within the Christian camp, within that kind of realm, what can practically we be doing that you feel comfortable saying is, okay, I don't know all the answers, but I do know that this and this and this and this are things we ought to be doing?
Well, I mean, I think it would. Go ahead, Miles.
So I'll just do this practically and then I'll let Chris finish. Is start small, start in your area, because what you begin to do affects around you. So what does that mean? School board, what does that mean? City council, those types of things. And begin to see the small things. Because before you can get into the broader things, you really need to clean in your own backyard and really start to work through those things. And then, if God allows it, to keep going then to the state, and then of course to the national level, and maybe even some world level things and through ambassadors and those types of things. I'm never going to say that it's a bad idea for Christians to be politicians. I think it's a dangerous place. I mean, I think it's a very hard place to be a Christian, and it's probably a hard place to maintain that, because you're not just thinking for one person anymore. You're thinking for a whole. You're having to deal with a whole, and so of course, I think there need to be more Christians in those spaces. But again, I'm going to preface what I said earlier: is Christian be the first thing. I did a city council. Of course, as a small town, they really didn't have anybody that wanted to do it. But I also see the benefit of just knowing events, knowing what's happening, what's in your city, and those types of things. And so, but it's a hard life. It's a hard go. But people need to do it because we at least need a voice at the table. And if we're going to stay a constitutional direction and have the democracy we have, there has to be multiple seats at the table. And we for sure, as Christians, want Christians voicing something at the table. And even if anything, it's just to preach the gospel in places it's not going to be preached. I mean, even the vice president himself said, I've talked more about Jesus in my political career in the last 6 months than I ever have. To me, that's kind of sad, because I feel like, as a Christian, those should have been some more conversations happening. But on the other side of it, well, at least it's starting, through whatever it, unfortunately, some of the major things it took to get there, but it still is happening. And I'm not saying it's perfect. And I'm not saying that our system and the people we have are in there are perfect, but the gospel is needed. And however the gospel is taken forward, you just got to trust in God to do it. And he's going to do that by Christians being in those spaces. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna go even more fundamental than that, based on 1 Corinthians 13, where Paul says, if I do all of these things, and I, even ultimately, if I give away my everything that I have, and I give my body up to be burned, but if I don't love people, I gain nothing. And I think, Miles, which is certainly not meant to really argue with anything that you've said, but I think it's even more fundamental than that everything that we do has to be motivated by loving people. We want people to follow Christ because we love them. We want our country to be a certain way, because not just that we love the country. I mean, we can say that we love the country, and that's kind of big picture and, almost mystical in a sense, but you can love your country but without loving people, and if you don't love people, then you've completely missed the point anyway. One of the big problems that we have now politically is that both sides see each other as the enemy. Well, if you love somebody, you don't see them as your enemy. You might see them as misinformed. You might see them as maybe not thinking straight, or you might even say they don't get it. But you can't love people and still treat them like an enemy. One of those two things is going to cancel the other one out. And so, for me, it starts even more fundamentally. And just, man, just start by loving your neighbor. Invite that guy that lives across the street over to your house to watch some football and eat pizza, right? And just start loving people. Because that's ultimately, what the scripture tells us. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we're not told to, run for city council or those things. And I'm not saying those things are bad. Those things are good. But what we are told is that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so to me, I think it really starts there. You guys, Lucas, you're not as old as Miles and I are, and Miles, you're not as old as I am, but you guys have been around church long enough to know we don't even do that well in the church. And so, for me, that's the most basic starting place that I can really think of is just love people.
Hmm. Man, y'all have and in both of the things that y'all said, y'all said some really good stuff. I think I get some clarity on some of those. Y'all hit on a lot of conversation. Y'all hit on a lot of topics that I think could be whole episodes in and of themselves. The government educating your kids. How do we deal with other religions in our country? Loving each other, but also not allowing idols in our country.
Sure.
You know, lots of different stuff that could be totally their own episode. So I don't want to come back into those, but I'm very thankful for y'all's wisdoms in those conversations.
Well, that's generally how conversations between Miles and I go. There's a lot of layers of wisdom. And,
Sure.
for those that are wise enough to hear, they benefit. So, right, Miles? Miles, why do you hate grace?
Yeah, I heard a lot in this episode about
Oh, that's funny.
how that the law is the best way to do things.
Yeah, Miles.
I feel like we're back in COVID where you're muted and you don't realize it. And we're constantly like, "Hey, you're muted. Your mic's off."
He knows we're muted, or he
I
knows.
know.
He hears.
It didn't need to be said on record. So, but
You were actually unmuted. You know, I heard everything.
no, I'm sure. Well, that's good. But I appreciate the questions. I think that this is a real thing that people are struggling with on both sides of the coin, and especially in the middle, because they're really torn in between people. And so I'm never going to disagree with what Chris said. I definitely am a huge proponent of the church needing to start in a house, loving each other, and then loving, neighbor, all those things that just, before we can change anything, let me rephrase that. Before God can use us to bring about change, we have to do what he says first. And so,
Sure.
That's a good thing. And that's a good way to end. So if you're listening to this and you live next to a red, full-blooded conservative or full blue across the street, God calls you to love all people. And to, most of all, if we love them truly, we will share the gospel with them, because that is the true sense of love that a Christian can have, is to say, hey, without this Jesus who brings joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, and all these things, and a peace that is beyond all, even the craziness that we went through in this episode, we still have peace because of Christ and the work that he has done. And so that's what we want to just encourage the listener and the watcher, is that, man, we serve a God who is way, way better than anything we could ever dream, and way, way greater than we can even explain in words. And so, and the encouragement is, man, read your Bible, turn and listen to him and do the things he's called you. And most of all, man, just submit to Christ. And I think that's where all three of us would want you to be. And so, yeah, Lucas, I appreciate it, man. It's a good conversation. If nothing else, it's always good to argue with Chris. I appreciate it a lot. So it brings me joy.
I saw lots of differences between your perspectives that I could have highlighted more just to promote more arguments, but I chose not to for the sake of.
But that wouldn't be loving, Lucas.
I would have appreciated it. So
it's not loving just to throw a hand grenade into the middle of a conversation, then just sit back and watch everything explode.
Hey, sometimes it is. Sometimes
I would never do that.
Well, let me say, in Philippians, Paul prays that the Philippians church would abound more and more, but that it would also abound with knowledge and discernment, so that they would approve of what is excellent and good and righteous. So, really, we're just trying to get down to what is good and righteous, so our love can be even greater.
Well, that's yeah,
right.
and actually that's actually a really good point, because when you say just love people, people have an idea of what that means, but loving people doesn't mean that you don't tell them the truth. In fact, it's unloving not to tell somebody the truth. Yeah. And so, when I say love people, I don't mean that, you accept everything, or that, you just affirm them in their sin, and, no, because that's not loving.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stop you there. I
just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there, because that could be a whole nother topic, and we really don't need to get going.
This train cannot be stopped.
Okay. But it is a good point. Love is not acceptance. And I think that's probably a good podcast to talk about. So, with that being said, man, I appreciate you, Lucas. Chris, always good to see you. And I look forward to the next one.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.